All right. Well, let's start with your why. What's your why for competing in something like Hyrox?
Okay, so my why is definitely a core value of mine, which is betterment. So I absolutely love that a group has come along and created Hyrox, which is an opportunity for all of us to show ourselves what we're capable of. So I'm obsessed with being just that little bit better every single day in my life. And it's like now I have this pursuit that I can undertake and just show myself what I'm capable of. And that is what I love about watching in High Rocks as well, seeing these normal people come along and show themselves what they're capable of and show themselves that they can actually do that hard thing and then sign up for the next one and go and do that hard thing just that little bit better. And I feel like that's so transferable to the whole rest of your life.
Love it. Love it. So you've been on here before,
Yep.
18 months ago, I think it was. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot's changed since then. You hadn't even done a Hyrox at that point. But like
Yep.
for people that don't know too much about you and Erg Army, like how is it like you describe what you do at Erg Army?
Yeah. So, yes, I am so grateful to be back on this podcast because I have learned so much from you. Like every single week, I learn something from you. So, I'm really grateful that you got me back on here. In terms of describing ergonomy and keeping it really concise, what our whole mission is to show somebody what they're capable of. So, give them the tools to show them that they can do that thing just that little bit better. And so Erg Army is less about the ergs, so less about the rower and the ski erg, and more about having an area of somebody's life where they're willing to do the work and get better at it and just giving them the tools to be able to do that. So it's an education program for people, but it's also an opportunity for them to really like put some work into something and see what they can do.
Love it. Love it. Okay. But it is very like you do a lot on the ergs, obviously, with Erg Army.
It would be 99% erg.
How did that part come about? Have you always done the ergs before founding Erg Army or?
Yeah, not at all. So yes, you're absolutely completely right. It's 99%, 99.9% ergs and that's 0.01%. But I have was never interested in the ergs at all. Did not row at school. Am from Australia, so didn't ski. Some people in Australia ski, but not that many. And what happened in 2013 when I opened my first gym is I realized I didn't know how to teach the rower. So we only had rowing machines in the gym at that stage, didn't have ski ergs, and I was trying to source education for myself and my coaches to be able to teach our members how to use the rowing machine effectively. And in doing that, I found that there was nothing really out there. So there wasn't really any kind of traveling roadshow of people that would go into gyms and educate coaches and educate members on how to use the equipment more effectively. So having discovered that there was nothing out there, I decided why not create it. And so that's what I did. I sold my gym and I traveled around the world training with and learning from some of the best rowers in the world. So the goal of mine was to take as much information from all the educators out there and put it into something that was simplified for the fitness industry. So I was always very aware that my goal was to work with the everyday athlete, the human that goes to the gym, rather than the elite athlete or the rowers out there. So it's just a normal person goes into the gym. Maybe they only do 5 or 10 minutes on the rower each time, but I wanted to make sure that they moved without getting an injury and moved in a way that improved their performance. So yeah, Erg Army was born properly in 2017, but I spent about 4 years building it and researching it, so I was able to be an educator on it.
Okay, awesome. Uh, and then, like I was just saying, like before when we last spoke, you hadn't done a Hyrox, and now you've
No.
done plenty. You've done a lot.
Yeah.
How have you found it in the past 18 months?
I love it so much. Like I love it more every time I do it. And there's two phases of my life. There's the BH and the AH, the before high rocks and the after high rocks. But I was very lucky for those listening that don't realize this. My first and second, maybe first and one of my my very first race was with you, and it was the absolute best because it was only a month or two before that you'd interviewed me on the podcast, and I was like, really like, nah, you split your rower up, 4 250s, blah, 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 like giving all this advice out when I'd never actually done the race. And I was so lucky because I had you next to me the entire race telling me exactly where to go, exactly what to do, exactly how long to do it for, exactly how to do it. Like I actually had a personal trainer with me, taking me around. And as we were coming into the roar, I still remember you were like, Jane, you're not going to like me for this, but we're going to do 500 meters each. And I remember being like, okay, you're the boss, you're the team captain today. And ever since then, ever since that race, I just feel like I've become a better coach and a better athlete. It's because I was so lucky. And I've never been penalized, I realized. And I think it's because in the very first race, you taught me how to do it without any penalties.
But that first race in Chicago, we couldn't get a penalty in the laps because it was only one lap every kilometre. So you eased in nicely with that one.
So funny. Here I was thinking that we were just so awesome. Truth is, we only had to go out the out and in the in. That's so funny.
The thing I remember about that race is just how happy you were on all the runs. You were like, yeah, it's fine. You're waving at everyone, shouting at everyone. I was like blowing.
I swear both of us should wear a microphone when we race together because like we go so far different in terms of moods, like except when we raced at World Champs. I'm pretty sure I was the one that was down here and you were trying to drag me along. But I like wave at everybody. I like I'm out there like I'm Kipchoge. Like I'm seriously thinking I'm like athlete of the universe. I wave, I high five people, and you're behind me with your, well, it's not a hanky, it's a sweatband, and you're like grunting.
Every now and then just go, oh.
Oh. Too funny.
So so what has changed? What have you changed your mind on in that time? Like you sort of touched on, like 500 meters on the row. Is that what you've like? That's presumably how you feel like most doubles to split things up. Anything else spring to mind?
Everything, absolutely everything. I think that one of the coolest things for a coach to do that's coaching in the space of Hyrox is to race and to race in multiple categories so you know how it feels. And so because you can look at Hyrox, and I think this is something I love so much about it, and you can have a superficial analysis of it and how you would attack it, and then you can do it and you can just keep peeling back layers of how you could do it slightly better. And so what I've learned and what I've changed my opinion on, I would say, is everything. I think that the way that I looked at it before Hyrox was each element in isolation rather than the compounding effect of each element on top of each other. And you don't really know what 100 wall balls feels like until you've done it at the end of a Hyrox and you've got all the stress and all the anxiety and all of the sensory overload as well as all of the physical fatigue. And so I think it's really easy to sit on the sidelines, and this is what I'd done previously, and look at each element kind of from a scientific perspective and be like, this should feel like this should feel like this. But then as soon as you're actually out there, it's a completely different element. And you do want to thrive when you're out there, but there's a lot of it that is just surviving. So you can go into it with a plan, and then on the day, things just change, and you have to know how to attack it, even when all of the certainty is taken away.
Yeah. So on the like we sort of touched on the row, on the ski now in a doubles, what's your opinion on how to split that up? And I guess it depends on like the strengths of the partners to some extent. But
Yep.
what's your view on the ski?
Yeah. So my view on the ski is time-based efforts. And so, for example, you and I were trying to achieve a 3 minutes 30-ish, 3:45-ish. And so our plan was to put you on first and put you on last. So you were the stronger athlete out of the two of us. So it was important that you went at the start and at the end so that you could run at my pace after, because you're slightly more tired. But I would always suggest time-based to people. And it's funny because this has been a somewhat controversial opinion because everyone looks at it, it's a total of 1,000 meters. Why wouldn't you just mathematically divide the 1,000 meters? And the reason I suggest a time-based is twofold. The first one is you achieve more meters in the same amount of time as you achieve more meters in the same amount of time as me. So let's say you did a 45-second effort. You might be hitting 200 meters in there. I might be hitting 180, but we're still both getting the same amount of rest and we're still contributing in a way that makes us feel really good. So I would suggest to most pairs that are mismatched in terms of ability to do time-based efforts. And then that way, the stronger athlete and the not as strong athlete are both getting adequate rest, but the stronger athlete is still actually contributing slightly more, which then lends itself to success in the preceding runs. So I would always suggest time-based. When I raced with Chris Woolley in Melbourne, though, everything went out the window and I just did exactly what I was told to do. So there is definitely some element of who feels good on the day. Let's play to their strengths. And having that adaptability on the day is a skill as well. And it is a strategy. And so I think you can go into it looking at it mathematically, but then also know that on the day, everything can change, and just being ready to go and knowing as a duo, how long does the ski erg need to take? At what heart rate do you need to be? What pace does the next run need to be? So looking at it in that totality rather than individually as the ski erg, individually as the run, individually as the sled. But having said that, wrapping it all back around, I still think time-based makes sense. I think that this whole 250 meters each is just like an awful way to spend the first 5 to 6 minutes of the race. I think that there's better ways to do it, and you don't want to do a 250 meter basically all out after you've run the fastest kilometer of your entire life, whether you meant to or not.
Yeah. How about like we've talked like mainly about the doubles tactics so far, but just in general, some people talk about like the ergs being a rest in Hyrox. What's your just like overall general approach to the ergs and your thoughts around that sort of side of things?
I love it. So when you interviewed me last, I remember feeling this like deep loyalty to the ergs. Like, don't you call my sport the rest? Now, what I feel about it now is absolutely they should be the rest, but that doesn't mean you go slow. It means that you've built up a really good pace in your zone two, like range in your zone two. So the idea isn't that you get on and you go slow. The idea is that you get on and you're able to sustain really good numbers, but your heart rate can drop. And so that takes a lot of skill development and a lot of volume on there. And I think a really good athlete to analyze right now is Joanna Wietrzyk. You watch her on those ergs, she looks like she's going slow, but she's right there with everybody in terms of pace. But her energy, she conserves so much energy, and her runs after are so much faster now than previously when she hadn't done any work on technique. So I do believe the ergs need to be rest. They are the opportunity to let the flywheel move for you. The rower, you get to have a nice little sit down. And so if you build up a really proficient technique and you've built up a good pace at zone two, they will be a rest, but you won't be the slowest in the race.
Okay. And is that because you feel like, if like you said, like zone two, which makes sense, like I understand that, but what's the reason that you wouldn't be in zone four, for example, like you would be on other stations? Is it because you don't necessarily get back what you put in, like you're only going to go a little bit quicker on those ergs if you do that?
Absolutely. So that's the first thing. By putting in that, like, let's say like 5% more effort, you might get off 2 to 3 seconds sooner. So it's not like, I look at so many other ways you can actually save time throughout the race. I think one of the easiest ways to save time is at the burpee broad jump. So many people just wander from the end to the start of the next one. And I'm like, go, just go. But then they fight for this like 2-second pace that just really does put you in the other zone. So you're fighting for numbers. The other thing is, the really cool thing about the ergs is when you put your body in the right angles, you don't have to work as hard, particularly the rower. If you can transfer body weight, you actually don't have to work as hard. So it is a lot about body positioning, similar to the sleds. The sleds are always going to be hard, but if you can actually put your body in the right angles, the sled becomes slightly lighter. Whereas a wall ball is always going to be hard, a lunge is always going to be hard, a burpee broad jump is always going to be hard, and there is a lot of skill to those as well. But the erg, the magic of the erg is if you can get in the right angles and you can apply force, the meters accumulate without you doing the work. None of the other obstacles accumulate without you doing the work. So that's where the magic actually is. And exactly what you said, it's like that slight improvement in your time could have been made up somewhere else for far less cost.
Makes sense. Like talking about technique, would does the technique that you feel like you should be applied in a Hyrox race Is that different to what you would say if someone's doing a 2K, for example, on the ergs? Would you employ a slightly different technique in Hyrox or not?
Oh, I absolutely love this question. And I would say no. I think from a technique point of view, there's like a little box where good technique sits, and you could push to one end or the roof, but it's going to look really similar no matter what you're doing, unless you're doing an absolute balls to the wall sprint, and then everything goes out the window and you're Eddie Hall on there just going like ham. Okay, but apart from that, you are most likely going to look very, very similar. There's a lot out there about saving your legs on the rower particularly, and I understand where the idea has come from to save your legs, because there's a lot of running and there's a lot of legs, but it's really interesting to see the adaptations that have happened to the rowing technique and how much more stress that actually puts on somebody's back and system, which is going to end up being more costly than simply making your legs stronger to be able to row and also run. So I would say if you look at an incredible rower out there doing an all-out 2K, what you're going to see different to a Hyroxer is there's nothing to do after a 2K. So they probably are going to have slightly more range of motion, slightly more power, less regard for recovery. If you were to analyze a rower or a ski ergo doing a 10K or a 15K, you'd probably see something more similar to what we want to see on the ergs, because there is a regard for the total volume of what you've actually got to do. But from a technique point of view, I would say that traditional is best. Like doing what has worked and that utilizes biomechanics is what's going to work in Hyrox, rather than us trying to game or outsmart the system.
Okay. Okay. So to sort of summarize, especially on the row, like it still is a full body, still use your legs like you would,
Yeah.
but you're not necessarily trying to go into zone 4, zone 5. It's more like a
Yeah.
zone 2 pace, good technique, but still use your legs.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And I saw a really great video. It was RMR did a video on the sled pull the other day, and I just absolutely loved it. And it was about how much your legs actually work in the sled pull. And I
Mhm.
was like, this is the truth of it, right? It's like we're not all going, okay, I've got to just pull the sled with my arms. I've got to just build up that arm strength, because we're saying, well, it actually is more efficient to use my legs. Yes, they're going to be slightly more fatigued for the running, but it's going to enable me to achieve the goal here sooner. So I might as well just make my legs stronger. So it's the same thing on the rower. Like it's particularly the rower, but also the ski erg. But yeah, you want to try and achieve your goal pace for a lower heart rate. And then you can achieve an even better pace for a lower heart rate as well. I don't think I've ever been in zone 2 in Hyrox though, at all. So
It's the
maybe
dream.
an hour after. It's the dream. You know what? Some of those elites do look like they're kind of in zone 2 at some points. And I'm like, you're just so unbelievable.
I'm pretty sure they're not though.
No, they just.
Yeah,
I
yeah. Uh, uh, I've got more technique questions, and we've not
Okay.
even talked about damper setting yet, have we? Have you noticed that?
I know. I
But
know.
I just want to ask you. You mentioned Joanna Wietrzyk, who
Mm-hmm.
seems like she's certainly a future potential world champion.
Yeah.
How has it been working with her? And kind of like I remember asking you last time, like because you'd worked
Yeah.
with Tia Clair Toomey and
Yeah.
James Newbury, and like, do you notice similar traits in Joanna? Like, can you see her as a future world champion?
Yeah, their focus of all of them, the focus of all of them is unmatched. Like it's absolutely like they just get this like laser focus on what it is they want, and they will follow the steps to get there. Like there's no like I don't feel like it or anything that comes into it. It's just this complete laser focus. And when I worked with Tia, it must have been 5 years ago now. So it's such a long time ago. And I just remember it was the first person I'd ever worked with, because I don't really work with elite athletes. I love working with normal people. Was the first person that just had no excuses, no reasons not to. I just said, do this, get into this position and hold this pace and XYZ. And she just like did it. And I remember being like, well, that was easy. Like, I remember being like, that was way easier. Like she could just get stuff. And it's so funny because Joanna, it was just a couple of months ago as well. She was really similar. It was just the same thing. And they have such a respect for expertise and education. Like both of them, and James is the same. They have such a respect for you being the educator and what you
Mm.
know. They're not resistant to you. They don't question it. They want to absolutely take on board everything you say so that they can get better. And it's really interesting. I've never actually put them kind of all in that same group, but they're all so humble as well. Like they're all just like humble, kind, like good people that just want to absolutely do their best. And yeah, but they're laser focused. I think Joanna is just so exciting to watch. And the fact that Tia, who I just believe is the greatest athlete of all time, is doing Hyrox now, just like I can't even sleep at night. I'm so excited.
It is exciting to see. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. And like I see her and James look like they're going to do the World Championships as well, which is amazing.
No.
So yeah, love it.
It's so amazing. And I've just moved to Queensland and there's so many elite athletes from Australia from Queensland. And I've realized why. It's because it is so hot up here and so humid that these people who stick to it like are just absolute machines. Like because it's hard work. And so they just are like the cream of the crop up here.
It's like survival of the fittest.
It is, exactly. They just die if they can't keep up.
And like we sort of talked about, like you've done some more high rocks now, and I was thinking like you've done them all around the world actually. So we done
Yeah.
in Chicago and then Nice, and I know you've done
Yeah.
some in the UK, Australia. What's
Yep.
it? Are you noticing differences around the world in those? Are there differences by location you're
Yes.
noticing?
Absolutely. So I feel so grateful that we raced in Chicago and that's where world champs are going to be. Like I can't believe that was just such a lucky turn of events for me. And then I raced in London and I thought Chicago was amazing, but I also know that it was like the first major that they'd done over there and I was working on the race directing team and so there was like lots happening. So I didn't get to enjoy the event as much as a spectator. And then when I went to London, like that was just such a spectator event, having that mezzanine level. I was like, this is just like, I was there for like 8 hours a day, like for 3 days. Like I needed a recovery after that. But so that was so beautifully organized and it was great from a spectator perspective. Nice was life changing. Like that was just so crazy. I love that so many UK people were talking about how hot it was in there as well. Everyone was like, it's just so hot. um, then I was really lucky to race in Singapore, and Singapore was the first taste I really got of the 3 laps. And that one was like, it was amazing because everyone was cheering for everyone. Like it was honestly like you just ran around there and every single person was just cheering like the whole time. And so it was just such a great environment. But I would have to say that the best event I've been a part of was Melbourne. I loved Melbourne. I may or may not be biased because that's where I'm from. Um, but it just felt like out of all of them, it's like every element from all the others that I absolutely loved all came together in Melbourne. It was just a really well organized event. There was just really good vibes. I also got to race in the same heat as both Tia and Joanna. So that was like a huge thrill personally. But yeah, I do notice big differences. I think it's been really amazing to watch its growth firsthand in Australia as well. Like you guys have been all over it for a few years, but we're all still very new to it. And it's like the excitement here is just like, it's just amazing. Like everyone's so into it.
Yeah. It's always felt like it would grow in Australia. Like I remember when it
Yeah.
first went there, I was like, I feel like this is going to be the same as the
Yeah.
UK, and I think that's
Yeah.
like showing to be right, now. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Everyone is in their Hyrox era.
So how was it? Like obviously you've raced with me, and then you upgraded, went raced with Chris Woolley. Who, for people who don't know, Chris has been on this podcast. He's one of the top athletes in the sport, and he's just qualified for the men's doubles elite 15 as well. How was that experience?
It was absolutely incredible. I wouldn't say I upgraded. I definitely found a teammate who talks more during the race, though. He is a chatterbox. Like I was redlining. I'm pretty sure from the moment I woke up that day, I was like 200 beats per minute. And he was just like, the whole way through and like just giving me updates about everything and it was an amazing experience. What I loved about it is I had an opportunity to just see how fast I could go. He had, like, he didn't really care. That's the wrong thing to say. He wasn't too phased on our outcome of that race because he had just come off winning the men's doubles elite and his spot to go to world champs in the doubles. And so he was just happy to be out there, happy to be alive. He was just, high-fiving kids and just having a great old time. And so I didn't have the pressure of him, wanting an amazing result, but I did have the pressure on myself to do my absolute best. So it was an amazing experience. We did 58 minutes, which is faster than I ever thought I could do anything ever. But I was pretty lucky. I only did 6 burpees and I kept count of them. So that shows I didn't have to do many burpees. But it was great. Like I did feel like I got to contribute enough. I didn't feel like it's not like I just did the runs and then stood by. I really was trash talking him slightly during the farmer's carry because he's a firefighter. And I was like, you put those down, the house burns down. Like, I'm like running along and he's like, we are not going fast enough if you could talk to me. So we actually did have a really great time out there. And it was such a huge thrill. Like, there was one point where we were 4th on the rowers because we came in 4th in that heat. We were 4th, and there was like Meg Sutherland, there was Tia and James, there was Joanna and Adrian, and then there was us, and then there was another friend, Maddie. And I was just like standing there and I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is so amazing. Yeah. So it was really cool. But you're still my favorite teammate, and I can't wait to race again.
Thank you. That's what I was waiting for.
Absolutely. We're going to go sub an hour.
You might have to do more than 6 burpees with me, if I'm honest.
I've been practicing. I'm ready.
Let's go back to some technique questions.
Yep.
Let's start with if someone's muscles hurt doing the row and ski, I'll leave it a bit more generic, like back, hamstrings, elbows on the ski, triceps. Like, are there certain things that they should be looking for that they might be doing wrong that could be contributing towards that?
Absolutely. So what we're looking for with the ergs is inertia. So we want that flywheel to continue spinning. So often when people feel pain in certain places, they're creating muscular fatigue at having to move a dead stopped object or a much more slowly moving object than if it was actually moving with some momentum. And so what a lot of people are doing when they're rowing is they're trying to muscle it so much that it becomes almost a stop-start movement. And when that wheel comes to more of a stop, there's more resistance on the flywheel, which means you have to work harder to start moving it again. And often when I'm teaching somebody in the Hyrox space, it would be like moving the sled, whether it's in a push or a pull, and pushing it, stopping, pushing it, stopping, pushing it, stopping. And what would end up happening is you would create a lot more fatigue through your muscles because you're having to move something that's not sliding. And so when people are rowing, it's not necessarily that they're doing that kind of old school, like pause, 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 but they're moving too slowly or not with enough power to actually catch the flywheel while it's still moving. So when someone complains to me about sore quads or sore hamstrings, usually the issue is the angles aren't exactly right. So they're in the wrong angle and they're activating the muscle groups too much or not enough, or they're opposing muscle groups too much or not enough. When it's more of a question of forearms, biceps, triceps, elbows, back, it is that more of a they're not moving in a nice cyclical way. And so the machine is causing them more stress and damage and load than it actually should. So my recommendation to people, apart from come to my workshop, would be to move their damper down slightly and adjust their positioning. There's actually we've got so many free videos on our Instagram as well about the positioning because we get it wrong. Our instinct on both of those machines is slightly wrong and it puts our body in a less powerful position. But I would definitely say one of the things I've seen, particularly in the Hyrox community, is this leaning towards a slightly higher damper than is necessary. And the machines, well, definitely on this side of the world, the machines are quite new and quite clean, which means that the damper setting is a heavier load than when a machine is slightly dirtier. So it will be putting a lot more stress on elbows, triceps, forearms, biceps, back.
Yeah. Okay. And let's go to damper now then. So
Mhm.
like you mentioned that. So what can you let's start at the basics. Can you explain what damper is, and maybe like drag factor, and we'll go from there.
Yep. I'm so happy I don't have a time limit because here we go. No, I'm joking. Okay, so damper setting is the dial on the side of the flywheel. Okay, and the higher you move your damper up, the more that it opens up the flywheel case, which enables a greater volume of air. So if you were at home and you can go out to your rowing machine right now, you can do this, or you can do this next time you're in the gym, just with that dial, push it up to a 10, and then you can see through those vents all the way through to the other side. What that does, moving it to a 10, is it increases the total capacity of air. If you were to move it closer down to a 1, the combs kind of become interlaced, less air can get in. Neither is harder or easier than the other. It simply adjusts the total capacity of air. What the athlete gets to do, and I'll come back to drag factor in a moment, is tap into the maximum percentage of that capacity of air that they can. So the impacts on your ability to tap into that highest percentage of the air, oh my goodness, those words, I just used all the wrong words. So the ability you have to tap into the highest percentage of air there comes from your technique, comes from your power, comes from your aerobic capacity, comes from your will to live. Okay. A lot of people look at it more as coming from your size. That is a part of it, but in Hyrox, it's equalized. So we're not even going to have size as part of the equation. So what we need to do when we're approaching the damper setting when it comes to Hyrox is we need to adjust the damper based on our ability to maintain a continuous stroke at the pace that we want, at the heart rate that we want. So a lot of people are showing up and going, oh, I saw this video on Instagram, they put it at a 7. So they're fighting for a 2-minute flat pace on a 7 and getting off and their heart rate's 180. 7 wasn't the right answer for you. Potentially you could have moved it to a 4 and held a 202 pace and your heart rate was 145 to 150. Yes, it's slightly slower, but for so much less fatigue. So the damper setting is such an untapped opportunity for somebody to save energy. The reason that we don't tap into it is because of two things. The first one is ego. Setting your damper up higher makes you feel like you're a more jacked human. Okay. And then the other reason is because we haven't actually analyzed the data on what yields the best result for us. We haven't actually done 1,000 meters at a 2, 1,000 meters at a 4, 1,000 meters at a 6, and run 1,000 meters after and analyzed our heart rate during both. What costs the most? What benefits the most? So in the simplest terms, the higher the damper is set, the greater the capacity of air. But it's always up to the individual to tap into that capacity of air. So you could be set on a 10 and only tapping into 20% of that capacity of air. And so when that damper is high, when that flywheel is open, that capacity of air isn't just a positive flow on that creates higher wattage, faster accumulation of meters. It's actually a faster rate of deceleration of the flywheel, which means the athlete doesn't just have to apply lots of force, they have to do it at a faster stroke rate to maintain the inertia of the flywheel, which means you have to work hard and you have to work fast. And in Hyrox, neither of those things are going to be a benefit for you. You need to be able to move slow, move smooth, and have a lot of power when you do it for low energy.
Okay. Okay. You've done that
I
before. You've
try and
explained that before.
I know I try to keep it like simple, but it's like it's one of those things that the more you learn about it, the more you have to say about it.
Yeah.
But something that is really, really interesting, and this will be the last thing I say about damper setting, but if you have a look at the ski erg and you have a look at the rower, Concept 2 placed a design change, an engineering change to the ski erg by placing a plastic cover on the front of the ski erg. And that's to adjust the total capacity of air. So total capacity of air is also known as drag factor. And the drag factor is a measurement of the slowing force of the flywheel. So when the ski erg was released onto the market, they didn't have this plastic cover on it because they were like, well, no one's going to put it at a 10 because that's not going to yield the best result. It's just going to create the greatest amount of fatigue. And here we all were, we just got on and we put it up to a 10. And then we're all like, my elbows, my biceps, I'm so much slower on the rower. So on their next release, Concept 2 actually placed a cover on the front of the ski erg. And so the total drag of the ski erg, the total capacity of air in the flywheel of the ski erg is only 60% of the total capacity of air on the rower, which I think is amazing. If the manufacturer can't explain to us the damper setting and instead creates an enduring change, we're all doomed.
You mentioned like you haven't uh, rode 1,000 meters and then run at 2 and 4. Is that something that you would recommend people do? That's to determine like the best damper or drag factor for them.
Definitely, because we can go into it's kind of guesswork once we arrive on the day. So, one of the best ways you can actually prepare for it is understand how do I maintain the pace I need. So, for example, for you, so what is your goal pace when you get to the rower at Hyrox in men's solo? What average are you trying to hold?
It's around 157 ish. I'm doing at the moment.
Great. So, what I'd be recommending for you, if your goal is to hold around 157, how much energy does it take to hold a 157 average pace for 1,000 meters on a two and then run 1,000 meters? Does it take more energy because you have to apply so much more force to get that kind of wattage? Or does it require less energy? And then it's the same thing on a three, on a four, etc. Because when you get to Hyrox, you do have a moment in time to change the damper. And yes, there is a new rule that we can change it multiple times, but you don't really want to be wasting your time doing that. So what you want to try and have studied before you show up is what does my stroke rate need to be? What does my power output need to be? And what is my rate of perceived exertion? Because I'm probably not checking my watch during the 1,000 meters on each different damper setting. So, for example, if you train at a gym and your ergs are so dusty and you're just like, I train on a 4, and you know exactly how to hold a 157 average pace on the 4 at your gym. You show up to Hyrox, the 4 there is on a brand new rower. It's never been used before. There's no dust at all. The 4 is the equivalent drag of about a 6 or a 7 at your gym. So it's going to be a totally unfamiliar environment. So if you haven't trained in a way where you know how to adjust your stroke rate and maintain your pace for your rate of perceived exertion, you're going to think that you're not doing as well on the day and there's some fault in your preparation. So the best way to do it is just know exactly what it feels like on a 3 or a 4 or a 5, a drag of 110, 120, 125. So you just adjust your stroke rate slightly, adjust your breathing slightly, and maintain your exact pace. You'll get off the rower feeling so much more confident and so much more fresh.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, makes sense. I was going to ask you about stroke rate actually, and I guess that kind of plays into that in terms of
Yeah.
it depends how the machine feels. But are there certain stroke rates that we should be thinking about? Is that like person specific or?
Yep. So stroke rate doesn't exist in isolation from drag factor. So the two of them exist in complete relationship because the you are always trying to catch the flywheel on each stroke, whether it's the ski erg or the rower, at the optimal point, at the point where the flywheel is coming to a stop, but not a complete stop. So a rower will talk about you're always trying to get the perfect stroke. And the perfect stroke in a boat is when the blade of the oar goes through at the exact right angle, at the exact right timing, with the exact amount of pressure on the most predictable level of drag. On the machines, we're actually trying to chase that same feeling. We want to hit the slowing force of the flywheel at the exact right time that all of our human energy goes into the machine. So when we look at stroke rate became really popular way for a rower to train because it's very important in a boat. If you're in a boat with 7 other people, your stroke rate needs to be exactly the same. And so what you see in these really good rowing crews is you see people of slightly different heights. And so some people have to overreach a little bit, but every single person in that boat needs to be moving at the exact same tempo. So much training for a rower is stroke rate training so that they're all in sync with each other. When it comes to a Hyrox athlete in particular, stroke rate training is a great way to learn about the drag factor and to learn when to apply force. Because depending on the power of your stroke and the length of your stroke, so how tall you are and how powerful you are going to achieve different amount of strokes in a certain period of time. So stroke rate training is far less relevant for a Hyrox athlete. But what we're looking for is a middle, and I hate there not being absolute answers. I wish I could just be like, it's 28, like for everybody, and damper 4, like it would just be so great. But that would be doing everybody a disservice because what we're looking for with stroke rate is we are looking for the ability to increase power at either a low stroke rate or a high stroke rate. So it not being that you could only go fast and powerful if you can only be powerful if you have a fast stroke rate. We want to still build power at a low stroke rate. So I think stroke rate training is a very useful tool to learn about the damper setting and drag factor, to build volume on the machines, and to build a familiarity with what does your body lean more towards? Does it lean more towards a slightly lower damper setting? Does that regulate your breathing and enable you to apply more force? Or are you more of an endurance athlete? You're happy to take more strokes, but you're probably going to have less power per stroke. And so stroke rate training can be really great for you to find your way, but there isn't a right stroke rate or a wrong stroke rate.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then just one last question on the ergs. Someone's asked, like, concept. If you're buying a machine for yourself, would you always go for a concept 2?
Always, without any question. Like, it's like everyone thinks that I work for Concept 2, which I don't, but their machines are just completely elite. Like, it's the thing I love about Concept 2 the most isn't just the mechanics of the actual machine, but it's the ecosystem around it. It's like all of the apps that have been created for it. It's the monitor itself. Like, your ability to track your data on there and your performance is just, it's just incredible. Like, they're just the best equipment. And if I was to buy one of the 3 right now, I'd actually buy a bike erg. So in case anyone's wondering, even though it's not in Hyrox, I just think you can at home add so much volume to your training on the bike erg, whereas you got a ski erg at home, you don't want to get on the ski erg at home.
No,
Like,
no.
it'll just stare at you.
I can vouch for that from experience.
It just looks at you with judgment all the time.
My gym's got a concept 2 row and ski, and then they bought an additional machine, and they like bought non-concept 2 versions to go alongside them, and it's just not worth it for the few
It's not
£100 that
right.
you save. Yeah.
Oh, I agree. And I even don't think it's worth it when I'm teaching in a studio that has all of the ski ergs attached to the wall. I just do not think that's worth it either. Like, I think it's like £100 difference to get the frame for it. And I'm like, you
Oh,
can
yeah.
move it around, you can look at different things. But yeah, none of the other brands, like, Concept 2 is just the best.
Yeah. Um, I've got some questions that we finish up on. Is there anything else I should have asked on the ergs before we move on? Anything you want to
Oh,
share?
good question. Let me think. Okay, damper setting. We've done strategy on partners. No, the only thing I would probably say, it's more of a comment, is I hate on the ski ergs that we can't pass off the handles. I
Uh,
just feel like it's really bad manners. But that's about it.
I mean, do you know what? I remember you saying that last time. Like, I think I asked how this is when it was allowed. Like, should
Yeah.
you let go? And you were like, "It's so rude if you just let go." And then, like, they put this rule in where it's like you've got to let go.
I know, I know. I just think it's like you can see somebody coming behind you, and instead of just holding the door open, you just push the door closed in their face. Like, that's what it feels like to me every time I see it. And then you see these little people, like, they've got to get up on their tiptoes trying to reach up for it. I'm like, I thought this sport was inclusive. What is going on here?
Definitely feels like a rule that doesn't make sense either.
I
I think
know.
anyway. Yeah.
I know. I don't know either. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed each day that they're going to change it and we can just all have better manners out there.
um, one thing I meant to ask you, in a race, like when things are getting tough, where does
Mhm.
your mind go in those moments to help you?
Yes, great question. Okay, so I would say when I definitely found it more challenging when I did solo pro, so for the first time in Singapore, and I found it really hard not having somebody else to not let down. Like, it just being me made it so much harder. Like, there was a part of me that was like, "Oh, Jane, you've just done so well to give this a go. Like, you showed up today. You just be proud of yourself." And like, this is the narrative in like my head, and then I was like, no, you got out of bed for this. Like, you'll keep going till you die. But it's so much easier if I've got you next to me, like grunting and wiping your sweat. I'm like, I can't let him down. I cannot let him down. So my mind absolutely goes to my responsibility to others. But also there is this part inside me, and I don't know if it's stubbornness, but when I show up, I just want to do my best. Like I just want to show myself what I'm capable of. And so when I'm in that phase of like my heart rate's really high, I feel sick, I actually want to give up, and the voice in my head is telling me to, I'm like, no, I'm going to see what happens if I don't give up. Like I'm going to see what happens if I can cross that finish line and really feel proud of myself.
Awesome. So when I'm with you, you just want to get it over and done with as quickly as possible. So this man has stopped sweating and grunting
Get me
next
out
to
of here.
me.
No, I'm like, no, do you know what I think to myself? I'm like, Greg has sacrificed so much to be racing with me. He could be doing so many other things right now, racing with so many other people. You just suck it up. Don't you let him down. Like, that's what I'm saying to my head. And then I'm also like, Greg, I can't do any more lunges.
And I'm like, really?
You're like, we are never racing together again.
Right. Some questions to finish up with. What's been your best ever sporting experience?
Yeah. So I knew you were going to ask this because this is one of your questions. And my best ever sporting experience would have to be racing in that heat with Tia and Joanna, and just like being able to see Tia in front of me, like it just, and like she was just cruising around there. Like she was just like do, 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 moving that sled like it was nothing, and just being out there, and then seeing Joanna, and Joanna's the same. Like she's just, both of them are just such machines. And I was like right there able to see it and just see how good they really are. Because I think one of the really cool things about Hyrox is everyone who shows up believes that they can be awesome and believes that they can keep improving. And there is so much opportunity, and we see these amazing athletes out there like showing up like Sinead and stuff, like just they are actually amazing. But like when I was next to Joanna and Tia, I was like, they are just light years ahead of me. Like it's like I can do my absolute best and throw myself into absolutely everything, and they are just going to keep getting better and keep getting better. So I think that was my best sporting experience, just seeing them and like being a part of that heat. And it was so exciting just to see how exceptional they actually are.
Yeah. Love it. How about your toughest ever?
Yep. Okay, so I'd have to say I'm not really an athlete. Just in full disclosure, I'm just a normal person. That now has the sport of high rocks. But in my whole life, I've played lots of sport, but not really at a super high level. But I would probably say there was a moment at Hyrox where somebody said to me that they didn't want to race with me because I wasn't fast enough. And this was the week right before. Someone had pulled out and someone said to me, I'm sorry, I don't want to race with you because you're not fast enough. And I was like, my little heart was like, oh, I'm not fast enough. And so I was like, that's okay. You know what? They're allowed to have their truth. And so when I went out there with Chris, something that was really tough for me was I was feeling like I was that person that wasn't going to be fast enough. And so being in a heat with such incredibly exceptional athletes and feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome, and then feeling the confirmation of that imposter syndrome that I wasn't fast enough, there was so much fear for probably the first 15 minutes of that race that I just wasn't meant to be there. Like I was just going to embarrass myself and let Chris down. And so there was this, I remember doing that first run, and it's like my mouth could not have been drier. Like I was like a desert, and I was like, my heart rate was so high, and it was just the whole race was ahead of me. I hadn't done anything. And I was like, that was the toughest moment, because I was like, I have to do everything I can to show myself that I belong here and to show myself that I can do it. So I'd probably say that was kind of that first 15 minutes of that race, and the days leading into that of self-doubt were the toughest moment in my sporting career.
But 58 minutes,
So
like
far.
whoever you're with to get round in 58 minutes is hard.
Thank you, Greg.
You've still got to
Thank
run it.
you.
It's amazing. So yeah,
Thank you. I did need a few weeks recovery. Any day now, we'll be back. But thank you.
What's the best piece of advice someone's given you or you've discovered while training for Hyrox?
Oh, great. Okay. So I actually think it was something that you told me about the sled pull. Okay. So you told me how the sled is heavier the further away it is. And that is one of the most useful pieces of advice. I have used that advice to give to other people so much because I think that the sled pull is that obstacle that you get there and you go, it is so heavy. Like I've never spoken to somebody post race that's been like, oh yeah, the sled pull was really light. Like everyone's like, it was heavier than I expected. And I remember you told me like it put the stronger athlete for the first half because the further away the sled is, the heavier it is. And it was such simple advice to you, but it's like changed so much of my ability to educate others and also my success on the sled pull too, because I find the sled pull really hard, but I also absolutely love that station. It's like a really like empowering movement. But I know that even if the first half of the sled pull is slightly harder, I know it's going to be easier in the second half. So I actually love that piece of advice so much.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
I
So
think
thank
that's
you.
one thing we talked about because I think often like you were doing the part of the station first, right? Like
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
us. But then
Yeah.
I think for sled pull it makes sense like for the stronger
Totally.
athletes. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And I love that because it's like I was really lucky. I think about these people that go into their first race both blind, like without somebody that's done it before, without somebody that runs a podcast on Hyrox. And I'm like, these poor people, because I was so lucky because like the strategy was that a slightly weaker runner starts the obstacle and the stronger runner finishes the obstacle, which makes so much sense because particularly on stations like the Roa, I did get like a good minute 45 rest before we had to run again and do the whole second half of the race. And I remember you told me going into the sled pull that that's what we were going to do. And even then, I still felt the second half was just so heavy, but it was so good. I was so lucky to have somebody that actually understood it because I do see so many other pairs trying to do a full lap of it or not knowing to put their weaker runner on first and all these kind of little tidbits of information that actually make the world of difference because you feel successful then. I felt like I could contribute as well. I didn't just feel like I was unsuccessful. Although I do have this vague memory of getting to the sled pull and being like, Greg, it's broken. You need to do it. And then I started to figure it out, but I was like, what even is this exercise?
It's a very much a technique based thing as well, wasn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And then last question: if you could plant one idea or piece of advice in the mind of everyone listening, what would it be?
Okay, so the idea that I would put in people's mind is that they are, and this is going to sound so motivational speaker of me, but they're capable of so much more than they realize. And every limit we have is ourself and what we've decided we can and can't do. And I think that Hyrox bursting onto the fitness scene I'm 40 now. And so for me, the next 10 years are sorted, like from a training perspective, and who knows even after that. But it's showing me that I'm not too old to be an athlete. I'm not, too slow to be an athlete. I can every single day show up and be slightly better. So the idea I would plant in somebody's head is what could possibly go wrong when you show up and do your best. And I know that your brain, being an Englishman, is going slightly cynical right now. But the truth of the matter is, what could go wrong when you give it your absolute all? Because you're going to feel proud of yourself just because you gave it your all. So don't hold yourself back. Sign up for all the races. I know in the UK it's much harder, but if you want to come over to Australia, we've got lots of races and there's still space in all of them. But the idea I would plant in somebody's head is what could possibly go wrong if you go all in on something.
Love it. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, amazing. Thank you for this.
It was so fun.
Have you got workshops coming up? Anything you want to share,
Yeah.
talk about?
It is workshops are completely off their chops. So that's something we say in Australia. It's off their chops. So somebody said to me recently, how did you even have a business before Hyrox was a thing? And I was like, we've been around. And then I was like, Hyrox has breathed new life into Erg Army. Like it's amazing because showing up and having to do 1,000 meters is very different to showing up to the gym and doing a minute here or there. So without a doubt, we have a lot of workshops coming up. I've got a tour of Australia coming up. We're doing Melbourne, Canberra, Brisbane, and then I'm racing in Brisbane, and then over to Singapore. Then we do a little bit more Australia, and then I'm coming over your way. So I'll be going around England and Ireland at this stage. I've maybe in Wales and Scotland, but definitely in England and Ireland, and then racing in Paris.
When is that? When you're in England and Ireland?
I'm in England and Ireland in March. So I get to Ireland on the 29th of March and I leave England on the 25th of April.
Okay, awesome. And
Yeah.
it's at Erg Army on Instagram.
That's it. Yep. Like Dumbledore's army, but cooler.
All right,
Save me.
amazing. Thank you so much for this. Loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else we should talk about?
No, this was the best. And I can't wait till we race again together.
Likewise, likewise. All right, amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. That was so fun.